I hope you heard some key words in our passage for today as we continue this joy ride with Jesus and with the Apostle Paul. A few key words in the passage would, number one, be the word together. He's emphasizing how they're together. Another key word would be the word one. He wants them to be one. Some translations say, I want you to stand as one man in defense of the gospel. But a word you might miss that really is significant, it appears 8 times in the passage, is the word you. Now, what's important about that word is that's a plural word in the original. So our translators must be messed up because they're not Southerners, right? Because we would know to translate that what? Y'all, okay? And so I hope you see through the passage the togetherness that he wants all of us to have. See, Paul knows the best rides are never alone. That's the reason he wrote this book, is because this church at Philippi, though many miles away from him, has taken care of him so that he's not alone in prison. And part of the reason he writes the book is simply to say thank you. But we also know that the best rides, even joy rides, are not alone. You might be in your car, it might be an open highway and wonderful weather with the windows rolled down, with just a lot of beautiful scenery. And that's really good. But all of a sudden add to the picture a loved one, a friend, someone who makes you laugh. And that joyride has turned even better because you have shared memories. You are able to celebrate things together. There's something about it. I know for Steffi and I, we will always say some of the best moments in our marriage was just going long distance trips together, especially before what? Cell phones, okay? Yeah, you before kids. I see where you're coming from, okay? Do that next service, please. And it was just the best time you had together. And so Paul wants to, first of all, paint a picture of the ideal of what God's church should look like. Let me just give you a few of those. First of all, he says, you need to be persisting together. Conduct yourself worthy of the gospel. And then Paul says, whether I'm there or I'm not there, Paul does not want, whether he lives or dies, whether he comes or goes, he does not want that to determine how they're living for God. Paul says it's a really bad sign is when I'm there, you act one way, and when I'm gone, you act another way. It's like the person that works for the boss, and the moment the boss is out of town, everything gets lax, everything changes. Paul says that's not right. Or it's like I get to experience a lot while I'll walk up to a group of guys and they're all talking, and I'll walk in the circle and they say, oh, let's change our language. Maybe we shouldn't tell that story. I always want to say, hey guys, there's somebody a lot stronger and bigger and better than me you need to be concerned about, right? And so Paul says consistency is an extreme key to our testimony. It's a wonderful, powerful message. It's more powerful than a stirring sermon or an inspiring book. A consistent Christian life speaks volumes. And then he says, standing together. But what Paul's trying to describe to them is we got to be together because, listen to me, we do not live on a playground in this world. We live on a battleground. And standing firm is that picture of readiness. It's a clarity of purpose. We know where we've been. We know where we're going. It's not a passive word. It's not resting, relaxing, sitting. It's I'm standing. And then that leads us to the next picture. It's fighting together, contending as one for the gospel. One translation puts it this way, we are in this fight together, so let's be together. You see, on this first section here, Paul is mixing some metaphors. One is, some of these words indicate more of the unity of an athletic team, okay? Some of them are more the unity you have when you're fighting a war. Now, I don't know which metaphor connects with you most. Some of you probably been a part of some great teams where there was unity and purpose, and everybody, no matter what was going on, was united and pulling the same direction. You've probably been a part of teams that weren't that way. Some of you in here have been in the military. One of the things that's always fascinated me is the amount of people who've been in the military who miss it. They've even been at war and they miss it. Listen to this quotation from a Marine. There's a camaraderie in combat that's unlike anything else. You are closer to those men than your family. After the war, you miss them more than anything. Then a soldier wrote this: the men I fought with would die for me, and I would die for them. And you just can't find that in civilian life. Here's what we're here to say today. Yes, you can. If God's church can't be like that, if it's not like that, then we got some kind of problem. No, it's our job to create that kind of camaraderie and closeness when we're fighting a battle against a common enemy, when we're in a common cause. So we're fighting together. We're also trusting together without being frightened. He says, if in the middle of this battle, and man, you know, guys, we think we have it bad in America today. Oh my goodness. You got Paul locked up in prison because of his preaching. And Paul says, if we stand confidently, it's a symbol to them that we're going to be saved. What's it saying? I really trust God no matter what the circumstances are around me. And it says to them, you're in trouble. You don't have something to stand on that can't be changed. I want to encourage us as Christians today. We don't need to be frightened. I see a lot of Christians today that we're running scared. We're seeing culture change so much. We're seeing things float away from what we believe. I understand that. I battle these same emotions. But my friends, listen, we don't need to run frightened. I think too many Christians are running frightened, so because they're so scared, they're willing to employ the tactics of the evil one for good. No, we don't run scared. We're confident that God is in control. And then one last thing he says of this picture of togetherness, we are suffering together. We all know there's a closeness through going through a tough time together that's hard to even describe. And I can only imagine the closeness through persecution and suffering. Guys, the apostles were so thrilled when these things happened. Listen to Acts 5:41. After they've been beaten, we went away rejoicing that we had been counted worthy of suffering shame for the disgrace of the gospel. They didn't walk away all mad and think the world was caving in on them. They walked away thinking, oh my goodness, we've been enough like Jesus that we're getting treated like Jesus. And so I love this ideal picture we see. And it's so needed today because we all know, we can't say this too many times, we live in a very divided world, very divided culture. And let me say this to us, guys. In the middle of this culture, you know, we were all so frustrated. Not only can Congress not get together and work on a budget, they can't even agree on a continual budget resolution. It's impossible now for sides to work together. Now, here's what I'm trying to say. If we can display what real love and unity and togetherness looks like, not based on our political beliefs, but based on our faith in Jesus Christ, that will shine brightly in the world around us. So we're persisting together, standing together, fighting together, trusting together, suffering together. There's an old Swedish proverb, you probably heard it in some wedding ceremonies. I think it's very true. Shared joy is double joy. Shared sorrow is half a sorrow. You see, that's why the ideal is for you to take this joyride, even when circumstances aren't good, with other people. That's what the church is all about. God knew we needed people to make this work. Now, let's have a reality check now. What's the reality though? Riding together can be challenging. You ever been on a ride that was supposed to be joyful and it really wasn't because the person you were with just complained the whole time? They were just super, super negative. I remember this memory came back. I hadn't thought about this in years and years. My first job was I was youth minister in Northport, Alabama, and I had a kid in the youth group that was graduating high school. His name was Ron. I was really close to him. And so Ron said, hey, when I graduate, would you take me and some of my friends to the beach? We want to behave. We think if you go, maybe that'll help. And so I agreed. I agreed to go. So the day after graduation, I pull up to Ron's house. Ron says, I'm sorry, buddy, but I can't go. But here are my friends. Would you take them? I didn't even know these cats, you know. It was the most miserable trip. I cut it short by some flimsy excuse. It just was no fun. And we know that often trying to do life together is not enjoyable. And Paul understands that. And Paul's dealing with that. Number one, remember, the purpose of this book was to give thanks for people who took the ride with him. The second purpose is there's some hints in this book that there's some problems going on in the Philippi church. 2 verses hint that. Philippians 4 verse 2. I plead with Euodia and I plead with Syntyche to be of the same mind in the Lord. Obviously these two women, Euodia and Syntyche, are not getting along. I'm frustrated that Paul doesn't tell us why. I figure they're arguing over who's got the worst name, okay? They're just not getting along. And Paul knows that could destroy everything. And then another hint is in the chapter we're about to start, Philippians 2:12, do everything without grumbling or arguing. So there's some grumbling, there's some arguing, there's some problems going on. And we all know that. You ever been in a sports team and they put it this way, that had a divided locker room? You feel that, don't you? It's frustrating. You don't have to raise your hands or poke the person beside you, but are there any family reunions that you dread going to because certain person's going to be there? Well, we've all experienced that. And guys, to live the way we're talking about today is exceptional. It really is supernatural. And guys, especially in the church. They're probably having some church issues like so many churches do, but and we normally spiritualize it. But almost every church split and problem I've ever seen are caused by ego and pride and sin, baptized in self-righteous language. It's really just me wanting to get my way. You drive through most cities in the South, and there's almost, we almost brag on it, but really it's not a really good sign. There's almost a church on every corner. What's that saying? And if we just wanted to boil it down to churches of Christ, there's pretty much churches almost lining the same road. And I wish we could say all of them or most of them or majority of them were caused by an evangelistic church plant. Most of them happened because of a church split. That's just natural. You ever heard the story of the guy that was shipwrecked and all alone on this island, and the rescue team came a few years later to get him, and they got on the island and they were, rescuing him, and they noticed there were 3 buildings on the island. So they asked him before they leave, what are these 3 buildings? He says, one is my home, the second's my church. I thought, that's pretty cool. Then they said, well, what's the 3rd building? That's the church I used to go to. It really is that bad, isn't it, guys? That's why unity has to be cherished. The unity of the Spirit has to be cultivated. Because, can I be honest, most of our problems are caused by secondary issues that I make primary. They're not the things that Paul would say are first importance. Most of our church squabbles and church divisions and church tension is over little secondary things where if somehow I just have this strong opinion that it's got to be the way I want it. Or oftentimes, I think the tension comes because you or I have a certain spiritual gift or talent, and I expect everybody to be just like me. You know, maybe I just really, really love to evangelize. I do. And all of us have to be evangelistic in some way. I would agree with that. But we all don't have the same gifts. And what I've seen in my life, and I've seen in church's life, is when I really get fired up about a certain thing, when I think, you know, it's most important, you know, for us to go serve, or it's most important for in-depth Bible study, or it's most important, those things are all important. But when I decide my thing is the most important, and I expect you to reflect what I like, then we get in a lot of trouble, a lot of tension. So, the reality is Satan's strategy is to divide us. The answer is unity. So think about where we've been so far. The answer is unity. We've seen the ideal, which is this church all working and fighting and living together. The reality is that doesn't always happen. Well, what's the path to unity? Well, look, go to chapter 2. We're just going to barely get into chapter 2 today. This is a really funny verse to me. Philippians 2, verse 1. Paul says, in light of this, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion. Now, just stop there for a second. Is that a setup or what? Basically, Paul, I think he's being a little sarcastic. If you care anything about anything, if you love Jesus, if you love the Bible, if you love the church, if you don't kick your dog, well then please do this, okay? So what's he getting at? I mean, he set him up like, hey man, God, this is big time, and this is the answer, guys, to our problem with division. Then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one mind. What's going to make Paul so joyful is when he hears that church is standing together. They are like-minded. That doesn't mean they see everything the same way. It means they have the same mindset. Oh, well, how does that happen, Paul? Well, let me get us to some really challenging verses. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. That's the usual way to live, right? Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. Can you imagine if we lived that way? Let me read that again. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others, you're kidding me, above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. Paul says we don't live the way the world does, always looking out for number one. It's like when you're a group picture, and then the picture comes out. Who's the first person you look for, even though there's 100 people? Yourself, right? Don't act like I'm crazy here, guys. That's what you do, I know, okay? And what determines whether it's a good picture or not? How good I look, okay? And Paul says we got to get away from that kind of thinking. It's not about you. You got to humble yourself. Now, as we're talking about humility here, the word humility was an adopted Christian word because it was a term of derision in the first century. You weren't complimenting someone to say they were humble. But the Christianity took it and honestly redefined it. It's a beautiful thing. It's the basis of putting others above myself. So think about living that way. Now, if you really want to Paul to blow your mind, then look at what he says next. I mean, it's pretty challenging to me. I don't know about you. But for me to put your interest above my own. But now listen to what he says. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, Not only do we as Christians need to think about Jesus a lot, we need to think like Jesus. And here's the example. Who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing, by taking the very nature of a servant and being in human likeness. Let's just stop there. We'll go further next week. Who's our example? It's God. Like I said a moment ago, the word humility was a term of derision. If you just wanted to really slam somebody, you called them humble. And now we run into what must have really slammed them, is that God is humble. No one had ever put those two words together before Jesus. Jesus is an example of someone who put our interest above his own, who humbled himself and became a servant. So he's our model. He's the servant God. Think about that. Think about that a lot today. Today's a really special day in our church because today is the day where we are announcing new deacons. We have so many great deacons. And don't complicate this, my friends. The word deacon's a really simple word. It's simply a servant. And so as we go through the deacon ordination over the next few moments, remember that what we're affirming, what we're celebrating, are people in our church who've lived a servant life to the point that we want to recognize them and give them a specific ministry. And so if the shepherds would come up right now and those who are being appointed, if you'd come up, let's celebrate. Not only do we follow a servant God, but all of us are called to be servants. This is going to be a great day. We look like that's it. All right, now, we have 7 communion tables. Each of our deacon couples have been assigned a table. So if you guys would just lay your trays down and go to your table. We're going to have a very special time of communion today. Doing some research this week just about deacons and the role of deacons, and one thing that I'd heard but never really looked into it was it was common for deacons to serve communion in the early days of the church. In fact, it's been mentioned already that the first deacons were chosen to serve at tables. So in the early church, it seemed to be a very natural thing that not only the tables of the widows that were overlooked, but it would be a beautiful servant role for them to serve at tables as the communion emblems were distributed. Many early church historians describe that the deacons often had critical roles in distributing both the bread and the wine during communion. It's a beautiful thing. And so this morning, as these couples take upon this incredible role, is their first act of service as deacons of this church is to serve us communion. So in just a moment, there are 7 tables. We're going to ask you to go to those tables. They'll be holding 2 trays out. They will say to you, this is the body and blood of Jesus given for you. So look them in the eye, affirm them as they affirm our common moment of unity is the story of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. I love that we get to do this today. So I'm going to pray, and then let's enjoy communion together. Father, thank you so much for this special day. Lord, I look at these 7 couples, and it just excites me so much about the future of our church, God, and the people that you're raising up into servant leadership roles. And Lord, every one of these men have displayed the exact qualifications, Father. They're not perfect. but they have proven that they're faithful, that they're servants. And so, Lord, today as we go to these tables and they serve us communion, beyond that, may we be reminded of this incredible story of your son Jesus, who is God in the flesh, who came to this earth and who served, who for the first time in all of history, God was called humbled. Oh God, we just can't get over that. We want to follow that Jesus. So help us to celebrate him, remember him today. I pray in Jesus' name, amen. What a beautiful sight to look across this room and seeing us taking communion together, remembering Jesus, affirming these servant couples, and being reminded of what really, really unites us. So as we come to the close of this message, let's get practical just for a moment. I want to ask two questions. First of all, are you lonely? I know it's easy to be a part of a crowded room like this and still feel lonely. And what Paul's writing is really just a handbook on how not to be lonely, how to treat each other so we don't hurt each other. And yet I still know that sometimes we hurt people. Maybe you've been even hurt in this church, and I'm here to apologize. Maybe you got church hurt in your past, and so it makes it hard. You see, Satan, because the ideal is this incredible love unity, Satan will do everything he can to make church the place you get hurt. And so I really want to beg you today to put that behind you. And if you're needing relationships, if you're lonely today and you even want the whole church to know it so we can pray for you, please don't sit there in your loneliness. That's not what we're about. If we've done wrong, let us know. The other question is, do you have relational tension in your life? Most of us in our families, or maybe in church, or maybe at work, or in our neighborhoods, it's so easy, it's so prevalent. And so here's the question I want to ask both of you who answered those questions. Are you willing to try the way of Jesus? Okay? We tried the world's way. We tried being hurt. We tried being offended. We tried lashing out. We tried trying to have our own way, trying to make everybody agree with us. You see, joyful people empty themselves. They empty themselves of the need to always be right. They empty themselves of the need to always be noticed and appreciated. They empty themselves of the desire to always speak first and have the last word. They empty themselves of the desire to always get their way. They want to be the first to say, I'm sorry. The first to say, I forgive you. Joyful people, this sounds so radical, but it's so true. Joyful people consider others better than themselves. I like the story of the little 8-year-old boy. He had grown up in an abusive home, and he was in a children's home, and church was going to provide Christmas for them, so they asked all the kids to at least put one thing they wanted for Christmas. Well, it's about a month before Christmas, and the church is on top of it, so they bring the gifts, and they hand this little 8-year-old boy a baby doll. And they're a little embarrassed about handing that to him. They think, did you really write that down? Is that what you wanted? And the little boy says, over Christmas, I'm going to have a chance to see my 3-year-old sister. And I just wanted something to give her. You know, in a worldly sense, we'd probably feel sorry for that boy. He didn't get anything. We don't need to feel sorry for him, because I promise you, he was the most joyful person in that room. And if we believe what Jesus says, and if we're willing to go practice it with everything we've heard today, it's not easy, then we can experience that kind of joy as we take this ride, not alone, but together. So if we could pray for you, if you're ready to follow Jesus, let us know. Just come forward as we all stand together and sing.